This is really just an update and some of the new features that have come out for ClickHouse as well, just to share how fast the technology is growing. So can I just get a show of hands? Who's used ClickHouse before, whether it's open source or the cloud version? Okay, so it's pretty good. So a few people have used it, probably about 40% I can see in the room, based on real-time analytics that I just did. But just for the people that haven't used ClickHouse, I just wanted to share one slide to talk about what is ClickHouse. So ClickHouse is an open source database. It's been around since around 2016. It's one of the fastest growing open source databases that's been around since 2016. This is an older slide. I think there's around 60,000 GitHub stars. There's lots of contributors, lots of releases that have just come through, and we'll talk about some of those today as well. But ultimately, ClickHouse is a column-orientated database. So essentially, it's really good for aggregations. It's really good for summarizing large sets of data that all live within a same column, right? So it's not a row-based database. It's not a transactional database. It's really made for columnar-based stores. It's really designed to have an optimal sorting order as well. So as you insert data into ClickHouse, it gets automatically sorted. We've learnt about replacing merge tree. That's one of the engines in ClickHouse. It will automatically sort the data in a specific format so that it knows where to look for the data. So ClickHouse's whole goal is to query, I guess, as least amount of data as possible so that it returns the results really fast. And it's not about doing sort of really big table scans on top of the data. By default, it is distributed. It scales really well both vertically, so you can scale. It's all written in C++, so there's no JVM limitations in ClickHouse, but it does scale really well to run both inserts and compute queries on top of the data on a single node, or you can distribute that. I think one of our biggest clusters that I've seen is around 4,000 servers, so quite a very large cluster running across multi-geographical regions as well. And it's an OLAP database. So obviously there's transactional databases and there's online analytical processing databases, which is an analytical database. And that's what ClickHouse is really built for. It's built for aggregations, and it's an OLAP-based database to be able to run that data as fast as possible. So that's just one slide on what is ClickHouse. But really the talk for today was just to talk about the latest release. So we're currently up to version 24.8. which is actually a pretty big release of some great features out there as well. I wanted to share this slide because every month the founder does a YouTube talk and basically walks through every single one of the new features and functions on YouTube live. So I've got the link there and also the link to this presentation as well in this slide deck. So what's new in ClickHouse specifically for this particular version? There's 19 new features that are all great, some really good features that do a whole bunch of really cool things when it comes to Hive-style partitioning, for example. You can do things like printing columns in a different format. The way projections and the mergers happen as well. Some great sort of new features that have come out. There's also heaps of performance optimizations. So ClickHouse has got a bit of a journey to make lots of performance improvements, specifically when it comes to joins. So ClickHouse being an analytical database with merging lots of data based on the merging engine, typically was not very efficient when it came to joins. However, there's been lots of improvements and there's going to be lots of more improvements to be able to improve the join performance. So every time you see performance optimizations, we'll always see some sort of join performance optimization in there as well. But the interesting features that I wanted to talk about today, so one of them is there's a new ClickHouse query analyzer that's now built into the production. It's been beta for quite a while, or experimental for a long time. So this new analyzer is now built into the ClickHouse product, and that's going to tell you exactly how your queries are being run. It'll basically analyze the query execution process to tell you where your queries are taking a long time, what's causing it to slow down as well. There's a new Kafka table engine that I wanted to talk about. So one of the main sources of ingesting data into ClickHouse is Kafka. There's also, I would say Kafka is probably one of the biggest sources. There's other sources being S3 or other file-based systems as well, whether it's CSV or Parquet. But Kafka is a pretty big ingestion source for ClickHouse. So there's some big improvements in the Kafka table engine there. There's also a new time series engine, which is quite interesting. So that's got more integration with metrics to be able to basically use Prometheus type metrics and storing that data in a very efficient OLAP columnar store database with this new time series engine. And finally, probably the most anticipated release is the new Json Object type in ClickHouse. Oh, that's all right. So that's something we'll talk about. So the new Json Object in ClickHouse, and I'll talk about why that's so important as well. I'm sorry. Okay, so just touching on the Kafka engine. So the Kafka engine traditionally has been part of the ClickHouse product for a long time, since 2017. So you've always been able to both read data from Kafka, it's basically a Kafka consumer, to be able to stream that data into ClickHouse. Very simple, if you can see that screen there, you can see how you can use those queries to basically consume directly from Kafka. You can both consume and then also write data out of Kafka as well, back into Kafka. There were some limitations with the first Kafka engine. So basically, if you're familiar with Kafka, the ClickHouse engine didn't really commit offsets, so it wasn't very good for duplication of data, for example. It wouldn't handle that very well if there was any data loss, for example. So the old engine didn't really handle that very well. With the new Kafka engine, so what it does now, it kind of tracks objects internally within ClickHouse. Like that's where it tracks the Kafka offsets. So basically, the new engine will now know exactly what topics and what particular rows it's read from Kafka, and it will store that data in, not Kafka, but in the ClickHouse Keeper. ClickHouse has its own keeper mechanism that used to be Zookeeper, but now it's its own ClickHouse Keeper. So the Kafka table engine will now store that data in the ClickHouse Keeper engine. And what that will do is that will keep the consistency, it will remove the duplicates. If there's any failures, it will know exactly where it read from, so that it can go back and read that from Kafka without having any of that duplication. So that's quite exciting, and that's one of the new features that's come out. The other one I wanted to mention is the time series engine. So traditionally, ClickHouse has been really good being an OLAP database for storing lots of data, that columnar store into its own file format. When it came to metrics, it was a little bit harder to store that data. So now ClickHouse has got new Prometheus-specific integrations for this new time series engine to be able to directly integrate with Prometheus, to be able to both store data into ClickHouse, whether it's sort of the data engine or the metrics engine. You can specify different engines to be able to store that data natively into ClickHouse. So that's quite a cool feature that was lacking for a little bit of time as well, to be able to have that deep integration with the time series engines there like Prometheus. And here's what it looks like in sort of a Prometheus configuration file, where you can set up basically your different database tables to write to the different ClickHouse engines using this new time series database engine. Sorry. Okay. Okay. And yeah, finally, just wanted to touch on the new JSON data type. So this is a brand new JSON object that was just released. There was a previous one, but it had some limitations when it came to extracting JSON. So if anyone's obviously worked with JSON, you know that it can be very dynamic. There could be lots of rows, lots of fields, lots of nested JSON. Quite hard to work with a database like ClickHouse. ClickHouse likes to be structured. It likes to have all of the columns in its own files. So it's quite difficult to do that with JSON, especially when it's very dynamic. And not only does it like to have its own columns in its own stored on its file system, ClickHouse prefers to know the data type of the column as well. So it likes to know, is it a string, is it an integer, is it an array? And previously it was very hard to do that with JSON because it's very dynamic. So now this new JSON data type has been enabled. It's currently in experimental beta mode, but it does work really well. And what the new JSON type does is basically it analyzes every single JSON string that comes through, and most importantly, it actually stores every path and every value in its own sub-column. So it's not its primary column. Every nested field will have its own sub-column on the file system, which is super important. So you can imagine every time you're creating a table, you would have to manually create table statement and then put the data type in the create statement. So now with the new JSON object, you don't have to do that. You just got to say it's just JSON, and then ClickHouse will go and work it out. What type of column is it? What type of data type it is? And then it will create a sub-column for every single hierarchical sort of nested column within the JSON object. And that's dynamic. That can change every time there's a new insert as well. So it's very, very exciting actually if you understand the merge tree engine underneath and how it works. It's exciting to see how fast it can create those sub-columns and then write that data to disk. There is a maximum limitation as well. So you could have a massive sort of JSON object. So with this data type, it will sort of have a maximum limit that you can set, and it could be like 1,000 objects, for example, which will then default back to a default string and just store the rest of it as a string, for example. But it's super powerful, has been tested pretty well, and it's just exciting that it can break those columns out into their own sub-columns and write that to disk. So just, a quick little intro on how to actually insert data. There's a few different ways of inserting JSON data into ClickHouse. So for example, you can see there, create table test. The data is just a JSON object, which is really cool. So that's it. That's all you got to do is you're going to have this data, and it's just going to automatically extract that. You can insert directly rows, just a JSON string into this test database as well, and that will just insert that data. Or you can use the JSON each row, which basically will go through and scan every single JSON row and then insert that data into ClickHouse. So yeah, it's a pretty cool, exciting feature that's come out. It's very longly anticipated and exciting to be out there as well. And also, lastly, just to read, how do you read the JSON data? It's basically dot notation to be able to read that through. You can cast that into different data types as well. And basically, just read that data out. So think of this, for example, select data as A, that could be a nested JSON, then you've got A and B, that could be a very dynamic nested JSON. It's just a very exciting feature that has been quite difficult to transform data into ClickHouse without having this. Okay, cool. So that was a quick update on some of the new 24.8 releases. Just a few more little announcements that I just wanted to share. So recently ClickHouse invested in a company called chDB, which is essentially a ClickHouse library that runs in your Python application. So completely serverless, just runs within your Python application, similar to a DuckDB sort of application. So we've made some big improvements on that. Traditionally, there's one or two sort of contributors to chDB, but now it's become part of the ClickHouse community and part of ClickHouse itself. So we've got a big team, a broader team now working on chDB to make it more efficient, more better, more integrated. And it's something that you can use to build within your applications. So if you're building Python applications, you can use chDB to directly run analytics through using your Python as well. And one of the slides I like to share is ClickHouse we have our own benchmarking tool. So we claim to be the fastest or the real-time data warehouse. We kind of back that up. So we have an open source benchmarking tool called ClickBench, where we run multiple comparisons against lots of different databases to see, and it's very fair, so everyone has the same data set, everyone has the same rules to follow, and ClickHouse has the same structure as well. So it's called ClickBench. I'll share the link in these slides as well. This specific one is for chDB, and to look at the performance of chDB versus its like competitors, so in this case DuckDB, Polaris and Pandas, just using Python Pandas. And then you can see the performance improvement. I mean, that's pretty impressive between those top three anyway, to be able to run at those speeds. But being able to run those comparison, those benchmarks, it's quite cool. And they're run using different sort of data. It's a traditional Apache weblog type data set, but it's used in different formats, whether it's JSON, Parquet, CSV, and text as well. So all of those tests are run, and this is online. It's called ClickBench, and we run it against ClickHouse versus other databases as well. Also, I should mention, you can't see in this slide, but all of these are different types of queries that you run. So there could be select star, select count, lots of different queries. So there's all different performance benchmarks that are being run against these platforms. Okay, also, so yeah, the next thing I want to talk about is ClickHouse has recently also invested into another company called PeerDB. And this is another interesting one. So I mentioned OLAP quite a bit. So OLAP is for online, OLAP databases for analytical processing. Typically, we see a lot of Postgres. And Postgres is an absolutely great, phenomenal database, and it's really built for transactional workloads. So if you're doing lots of updates, lots of very complex joins, lots of master record type data, Postgres is an amazing database for those sort of use cases. When you try and run analytics on Postgres, that's where it may become a little bit slower. So it's really, as I like to say, it's like the two sides of the same data coin. So PeerDB enables that acquisition to provide sort of very seamless integration and synchronization between Postgres and ClickHouse. So it's a really fast change data capture tool that captures data from Postgres into ClickHouse, being able to have the best of both worlds. So you can use your transactional database as well as your analytical database. So PeerDB is just a great tool. We had some great feedback on PeerDB as well. Just the way it does the initial load of Postgres into ClickHouse and then mirroring the snapshots after that. Yeah, so we've had some really good feedback, and it's an amazing tool. Okay, so the only slide I have on ClickHouse Cloud. So ClickHouse Cloud is a little bit different to the self-managed. One of the main, actually the biggest difference between ClickHouse Cloud and self-managed is the separation of storage and compute. So ClickHouse Cloud, there is no storage on the actual compute nodes. It's all backed onto S3. It's got a function called shared merge tree. It's not like replacing merge tree, it's shared merge tree, which is one copy of the data, one shard that's all backed onto S3. Whereas ClickHouse self-managed, the shards and replicas are managed individually on every single server. So the only slide I have on ClickHouse Cloud is a new product that's in private preview called Bring Your Own Cloud, where essentially the data plane from ClickHouse Cloud is dropped into a customer's VPC, and then the control plane is a shared environment where the customer and ClickHouse can run that service fully managed for the customer, but all of the data, all of the integration, all lies within the customer's VPC. So that's for someone that's got strict data requirements. For example, there is that BYOC model in there as well. Okay, so I think I've got one more slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I do have some questions. I've got some time for questions at the end. Couple of more things. We are releasing more and more sort of use cases as well that are public on ClickHouse, for example. One of my favorite ones is a new product that we built called, it's a new service, I guess, a new website called CryptoHouse. Anyone that's into Solana or Ethereum, sort of blockchain analytics, you can get real-time analytics from CryptoHouse. Run in there, you can go in there, all the data it's updated frequently. You can run searches, queries, see all the latest blocks, transactions, any other crypto type thing is all live on CryptoHouse, and you can do all sorts of analytics on top of CryptoHouse. So that's a really cool feature there as well. Okay, so I think this is my last slide. Just from a training academy, and Chris mentioned it earlier, that the training at ClickHouse is pretty phenomenal. Actually, it's free. It's all on demand. We run workshops across all different regions. Some of the ClickHouse fundamentals are a great course. It's a 3-day course. It's all free. It's all online. Actually, I think we're running a live session in the next 2 weeks in our region as well. Then there's a new ClickHouse developer certification. So there's a training course to go along with that. It's all free and on demand as well. So I know it says existing workshops, but that's only new as well. There's a ClickHouse developer workshop. And recently we've started with a ClickHouse admin workshop as well, where you can run all of your ClickHouse admin for whether it's self-managed or ClickHouse Cloud as well. And a couple of other more use case driven workshops, whether it's Postgres, Redshift, or BigQuery as well, migrations. Okay. All right, well, I think that's all I had. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone. I'm here for questions if anyone's got any questions, but just from a thank you perspective, thanks for coming to the meetup. We do have a really big community all around the world, basically, and Please join us at whether it's, the ClickHouse community Slack has lots of subscribers on there as well, so we'll share the link to how to get access to the community Slack and all the other community pages there as well. But thank you, everyone.